All right. So I want to welcome everyone to Voices of Color. This is our first meeting. It's really been a long time coming, and I'm glad that this can be with two really special people that I enjoy working with. I do want to give a disclaimer that Voices of Color is not endorsed or affiliated with the Society for Creative Anachronism Incorporated. The views of hosts and guests do not represent the views, values, or policies of the SCA Inc. It's really important that folks know this really is a show for people of color to come and share their experiences, to really have this affinity space that helps validate what occurs in and outside of the SCA. It's kind of like an affinity space with the opportunity for others to see what is happening in this space. We're going to discuss important topics. We are very race forward in this Voices of Color area because it's us, it's real, we're human beings. Our identities don't end at the gate. These experiences that we have transcend everything that we do. And we hopefully want to engage allies along the way, because we need allies in order to promote change and to really look at how we can make the SCA a more inclusive and equitable space. We ask that allies who are watching this really sit with some discomfort. It's difficult to come on and be your authentic and real self and talk about stories that are personal to you. And so sit with the discomfort and find the one or two things that really strike you as something that you can take and use after the show is done. I want to give a thank you ahead of time to Ashoxi for helping me kind of prep for this work, to understand how to do a show. This show is unlike any others in that this is just our space to be real. So, don't expect an interview type format. This is us having a discussion. But Ashoxi really helped me understand some best ways to do this. And then obviously I want to thank my guest today, who will in the future also be my co-host. So I'd like to introduce both of our guests, even though they probably don't need introductions. I'm going to do it anyways. So Jessica, known as Zara in the SCA, is a writer and editor with a focus on rhetoric and public policy. She has been in the SCA since 2016 and is particularly excited about exploring and sharing the history of what is now modern-day Ethiopia and Eritrea. She is the current Corporate Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the SCA. And Gigi is a sociologist with a graduate degree in environmental science who is known for her work at labelladonna.net. There she blogs about living history, historical fashion, and her independent research into the lives of women from the past. In the SCA, she is a Laurel and member of board directors. She also hobbies with other historical groups interpreting the 14th, 15th, and 18th century. Today, we are here to talk about experiences in these groups and life in general as people of color. And I specifically asked these two to be the first guest because I want to help people understand what it's like to be a woman of color doing DEI work while still being a woman of color outside the gate. Like I said, these stories don't end at the gate. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Gigi and Jessica.
Thank you. Thank you for introducing me. I just want to take a minute to say I appreciate also being your first guest and the opportunity to co-host with you in the future. It's a real privilege to be here with you, Nina. I want to reiterate what you said about this being a conversation between three women of color. I identify as a Black woman, and I'm going to be talking to these other two women of color about my experiences. So what you guys are going to see is a conversation between us. It's going to be very authentic. So welcome to our living room, basically. And I want to make sure I say this. I'm speaking tonight as Gigi, a Black woman, about my experiences being a person of color in historical recreation spaces. My words tonight do not represent the SCA or any other official group. I might talk about, the Jane Austen group. I might talk about the reenactment groups that I've been affiliated with in the past, but I don't speak for them. I'm only speaking for myself tonight as Gigi.
Yes, I really want to echo what Gigi said. I'm so honored to be here. This is such a cool thing that you're doing. I'm very excited to be one of the co-hosts and get to hear the perspectives of everyone moving forward. This is a really important space for people to be able to represent themselves in. And also, yeah, you just get Jessica tonight. I am not speaking on behalf of any entity other than myself. I am not here as a corporate officer. I am not here as anything except Jessica, Skadian, confused individual who's doing her best. So that's what you get.
So I think to kind of lead off the conversation, I would like you to share what you feel sharing about your personal experiences as both a POC outside of the SCA and a person of color in the SCA, especially doing the DEI work.
Gigi, you want to start?
No, you can start.
Okay. All right. Well, so like I mentioned, I got involved in the SCA in 2016. So this was a very tumultuous time to be a member of a marginalized group of any variety, because in the fall of 2016, there was an election, and the repercussions of that election were going to be very negative, basically, for folks in marginalized groups. So this is a really difficult time. In the SCA, I found kind of a support group, and really it felt like a second family to me. It was such a big deal to have this supportive community who were there for me when I was so concerned about what was going to be happening next in the modern world. And it was really a group that was unlike any I'd ever experienced before. I mean, I've been in different hobbies, I've done different sports clubs, but the SCA really is very unique in how occasionally all-encompassing it can feel, which is not always good, but in this case was pretty much exactly what I needed to not be panicking on the daily. I had people offering me to escort me places in case I needed to feel like I had backup. I had people reaching out to check in on me daily. It was a really amazing thing to have. And so I hit the SCA pretty hard, right? It was 36 events in my first full year, which is bananas now. And I don't know how I maintain that schedule now that I'm in kind of pandemic mindset, and I'm like, what do you mean I have to do 2 things this week? I haven't done 2 things in a week in a year. So yeah, no, I'm kind of feeling I was a little crazy, but it was really important to me. That said, it became apparent very quickly that the SCA was a very homogenous space. And it became apparent very quickly that, like in many other homogenous spaces, there wasn't a lot of active attention being paid towards deconstructing some of those hegemonic structures. So they were just there, and they were often not at all malicious. They were often completely unintentional. I mean, I'm sure you both can speak to seeing that and being faced with this kind of, I know that this isn't aimed at me in a negative way, but it's still affecting me negatively. And so that was kind of how I ended up moving into education and DEI work. So I guess that's really my origin, and then into DEI.
My turn. So I do want to say something about what you just said, though. Moving into like a DEI space in general, I am a person of color. So even if I'm not working in education or working in, equity and inclusion, and I'm still dealing with it like every day of my life. It affects equity and inclusion, or should I say inequity and exclusion, affect every aspect of my life and have since I came into this world in the hospital when I was born. It has affected my medical care. It has affected my access to amenities. It has affected my education. It has affected my work and career opportunities. It's affected my recreation. It has affected, my physical safety. It has affected my mental health. So even if I hadn't had opportunities in historical costuming and reenactment to stand on a platform of I have an office or I'm here to teach a class on equity and inclusion, I would still be doing the work. So when I started the SCA in 2008, I, entered into a place that wasn't very diverse, and people had questions for me, often about my color, and often about how, like, what were my plans in the SCA, and how was I going to deal with being different. And those questions ended up making me feel very othered, right? Because other people, when they showed up, it wasn't, well, are you gonna portray a person of color? Like, do you want to portray a servant? Like, what are you gonna do? Other people weren't, like, white people weren't getting those questions. So then I had to navigate, thinking about myself as a Black person in the SCA, even though I didn't want to think about that. I just wanted to think about history. So it's been a topic that I've had to address over and over again, not because I want to, but because it comes up all the time. So from 2008 to, I guess, when I was elevated in 2016, 2015, one of those years, I was on this journey of like exploration of history and meeting people some of which really provided a nurturing, safe space for me and wanted to support me as just a regular person showing up to geek out over history. And then I also had to deal with people who wanted to discourage me from doing things they didn't think a person of color should do in the SCA, or quiz me about being a Black woman and how I was going to exist in the SCA. So my origin, I had to deal with both of those things. And I think really, really appreciative of the people who just treated me like a human being. They're part of my SCA family. They're part of my heart. They're my friends.
I had kind of a similar coming into the SCA, and it was more, I didn't know about the SCA. Like I said in my interview, I really thought I was walking into role models. I knew that it was a very white space, and I remember turning to my partner and actually asking, like, do I have to have a slave persona? Like, is that what's expected of people of color? And it may have been a completely naive question. One, because I've never done anything like this. But the way that the SDA portrayed itself at the time made me think about that, made me wonder what the expectations of a person of color were. And just knowing in general that it's different, right? Because you're navigating two different worlds that merge, that cannot be separated. And so Giada and Jessica, like you talked about with the election, right? And the racial injustice that was starting to become more prominent, really had an impact on my experience in the SCA. Again, as I said in my interview with Ashoxi, I don't stop being a person of color once I leave the gate. So when people say, leave your politics at the gate, I'm like, that's not how it works. So have y'all noticed how the modern world has seeped into the SCA, or how have that experience, has it influenced your experience in the SCA at all?
Can I go first? Two things I've noticed. about like the modern world in the SCA. There are questions that I get in the SCA that are like inextricably linked to what's going on in the modern world. So when I'm at an event or around people who are members of the SCA, or when I'm, on online spaces, I'm involved in the Jane Austen community. I'm involved in, reenactment groups. I'm involved with reenactment groups that portray the 14th century in Italy. Questions come up like, where should we, so for instance, when I went to Italy to portray a woman from 1387 in Romagna, a friendly person at that event mentioned to me, yeah, well, I'm sure your camp is at the back. Like the camp they placed you with is at the back of the event because they couldn't put you at the front because people like you didn't exist in 1387 in Italy. So, you're here and it's great that you're here, but of course that's why. And I was just, it did not, and I don't know if it's true or not, but this person came to me to tell me this thing that I wish they had never brought it up, because then I was like, is that why I'm in this camp? Because I was in the back corner of the entire event. And I loved the people who were hosting me. They were super nice. I was having a great time. But that was, and so in Italy, there is a huge divide, based on immigrants and race. And a lot of the immigrants in Italy are from Africa. And so there are issues there that were seeping into that person's perception of me and their conversation with me, because we could have talked about a myriad of other things, but he wanted to tell me why he thought I was in a camp at the back of the event. So in America, I get questions like, well, why do you make everything about equity and inclusion? And like I said before, it's because everything is about equity and inclusion. Like it really does touch most aspects of my life. So when I talk about it, it's not because I want to be political. It's because I'm talking about my experience, and those concepts are concepts that I have to deal with every day. So, and then the other thing is that as an organization in, 2018 or so, when the DI office was created at the corporate level, and our organization stated basically that equity and inclusion needs to be like woven into the fabric of the SCA. I believed that, right? I believe that to be a true statement. So when I bring it up, it's because it has been said in our organization that this is something we want to address. So when you think about inspirational equality, and when you think about pride, right? Those are things that are talked about in the SCA, and they're not separated. It's because we have large communities that have brought up those topics, and people are aware that they are good things to support, and they are honorable, and integrity and the chivalry, all those things go along with supporting people who are in marginalized groups. So for me, I think it's really time for us to talk about race and talk about the things that go on, just so we can bring awareness to the fact that there is some inequity, and we can move to fixing it. Because inspirational equality would not have happened if people hadn't had those discussions, if people weren't willing to sit down and talk about why that hadn't happened already. What were the dynamics that led to that being missing from our game? And so here we have an opportunity to allow people, to listen to our conversation about equity and inclusion in our lives, with the hopes of it helps them to understand why they should support us, why we need their support.
Oh my God. So I have so many feelings about, like, as you were speaking, like my soul was just like, what is this? Like, it's very difficult to try to get into a hobby because you're looking to explore something, and then have that like weird reminder that you're othered. Like every time you kind of like let your guard down, you're like, oh, nope, you're getting Rosa Parks to the back of the tents because you weren't supposed to be here, which is fundamentally untrue, right? Fundamentally untrue. There were Black people in medieval Europe. It's ridiculous to think otherwise. There's been classes on it. There's books on it. Come on, people. People should know better. If you're studying history, you should know better. But I mean, even more important than that, why is that the focus, right? Why is that the focus of all the anomalous things we do, right? People have come up to me and talked to me about how, well, I don't know how historically accurate that persona is. And I'm like, we are standing in a gymnasium. Those are sixth graders, portraits on the wall. How dare you come at me and be like, I don't know about your apron. I mean, like, it's ridiculous to me. I've never felt like I needed to remind people that Black people and people of color exist as frequently as I have found myself doing it in this space where there are so few of us. I feel like I am forever waving a flag of like, but if you will recall, I am Black. And that gets tiring. It feels like I never get to take a break. It feels like I always am hyper aware of when I need to defend my identity, the existence of people that look like me throughout history, outside of the concept of slavery, which even the most well-meaning people will throw at me. And from what I've heard from other people, almost everyone has gotten some variety of the, are you going to portray a slave? Were you planning on? Everyone gets that. And every time I tell people, they're like, oh, who would say that? And I'm like, apparently everyone. Because everyone of color I know has heard some variety of it. To kind of talk about the original question really briefly, we're all talking about kind of a term alluding, I would say, to the term tokenism, right? Where people want to appear inclusive, but because they're not actually behaving in inclusive ways, it's just symbolic. And they take an individual and they value the appearance of diversity. They go, look, our 6 Black people killing it. When in reality, they are not actually making efforts to include these people. And those people are very much reduced to whatever aspect they're contributing to the diversity meter. It happens a lot. It happens a lot in spaces that are homogenous and don't have many members of marginalized groups. People of color are expected to be able to speak for one another. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked something on behalf of, or expected to speak on behalf of the entirety of the Black community. And I'll usually joke, right? I'll usually make some stupid comment about how I'll bring it up at the next Black people meeting, or, I'll refer to our last poll. But realistically, we're not a monolith. We can't speak for everyone else. We can't give you permission for everyone else. I can't absolve you of behavior that makes you feel a certain way because you feel guilty about offending other Black folks. I hate when people use me as the reasoning behind why we don't have issues because, well, there's this person and she's here. And I'm like, I hate that. It again makes me feel constantly othered. There's so many issues with being tokenized because it never feels malicious at the time. It always feels kind of like, look, I'm valuing you for this. But really what it is I'm only valuing you for this. And that's not fair. People of color have every right to exist as whole, entire individuals and don't deserve to be shoehorned into prescribed roles. It's just offensive and it's problematic. I would say that's probably the singular largest way I've seen kind of the modern experience really smash headfirst in the SCA, honestly.
Absolutely. I think I've had many conversations about recruitment of more people of color. And, I go with well, we need to have, videos that include more people of color. We need to have more people of color at, displays and all of these different events and be outward facing. And at the time, there are so few of us that you do end up feeling tokenized a lot. On the same token, I think about, and I talk to my partner about this constantly. If I don't do the DEI work, well, who will? Right? And it ends up being just that feeling like you have to do something because nobody else is going to do it. And so, Gigi, I'd love to hear your perspective on that, especially because you started the Society DEI movement and continue to do that at the BOD level, which I'm sure cannot be easy. This is an organization that is steeped in, I don't want to say tradition, but doesn't quite like change and likes to kind of tokenize the small movements and say, yeah, we're doing the thing like Jessica was talking about. What has been your experience?
So I really want to say, it's interesting you use the phrase, I started the movement, because I was the first equity inclusion officer for the society. So that, just hearing that, it's like, wow, that was a big deal, right? Like that was kind of a big deal. I was just doing a job that I thought I could do, and I interviewed for it, and then I got it, and then I did it. But I think I kind of look to the people who actually wrote the position description, right, as the people who kicked it off. The people who were sitting on the board at that time, there was a person of color, and then there were two white people who helped write that. Like, all of the board members voted on it, but the people who actually put pen to paper were not all people of color. So I really give them kudos for kicking off this movement, because I think without them, it would not have happened. So my experience in it, though, and you talk about recruitment, and Jessica talks a little bit about tokenism, so I want to bring these all together. My experience in working in equity and inclusion in the SCA was happy and emotional, right? Happy and, I don't want to say sad, but like not such pleasant, like distressing emotions, happiness, and also distressing emotions. And let me explain. I am a person who likes to give 100%, right? When I go in like all in. It's probably because I'm autistic, right? Hyper focus, special interests. Like when I decide to do something, I'm like, I'm doing it. So I really wanted to make the job work. I wanted to, hit all of the objectives in my position description and be everything I needed to be to help the office and help the SCA. And I really put myself out there in public at events. So I went to Penzic, I went to some other events, and I taught classes. And then after class, I would talk to people. And what really kept me in the work, even when it got difficult, even when, I felt like it was bureaucracy and I felt maybe I was being tokenized, and it was when people would come to me with like tears in their eyes, and they would say to me, thank you for being this person. Thank you for teaching this class. Thank you for hitting on this concept, because I've experienced some really horrible things in the SCA, and you being here makes me hopeful that no one else will have to do that. They were putting a lot of stock in just, this one human being, right? When really it's a movement that takes everyone working on it, not just one person. But I took that on, though, when I would hear those people, when I would hear their stories, and they would tell me, this is what happened. This is the injustice. This is the racism. This is the sexism. This is the homophobia. This is the ableism I experienced. And and they would be crying, relating this. And they would say, but even though it was never addressed, and I still don't have any closure from it, just you being here makes me hopeful. And so overall, my experience in DEI was great, because I felt like I was doing something for those people, if only just being in the position, being there for them to come and talk to, being there to give them hope. I felt like I was doing something. But it also made me feel like I needed to do as much as possible. And there was a lot of emotional labor involved in that. And I kind of overextended myself sometimes, because I didn't want to let those people down, those people who had opened up their hearts to me and told me, really personal information, and they had so much hope. It was like the memories of their faces just made me want to just go above and beyond. But one person can never take that on. One person can't. It's impossible. And even though I, deluded myself thinking that, I could be Superwoman or Wonder Woman, I couldn't. It's really because of all the people attending those classes, all those people teaching classes of their own, talking about these concepts on their own in the SCA. It was the movement really is everyone who was involved in doing the work. And I'm so appreciative of all those people that I also met. You know, they would email me or come to me at an event and say, you know, I'm actually going to teach a class, you know, I'm disabled, or I have a disabled relative, or, you know, I'm a person of color, but I'm white passing. So people say things around me that I know need to be addressed, but they say them to me because they don't think I'm a person of color. So I'm going to start working on that, working on how I can improve things by bringing light to certain topics. So happy about the real movement, which is every single person that has worked on educating someone else, or assisting someone else, or speaking up for someone else who needed to be spoken up for, or providing safe harbor for someone who needed a safe space. So I'm going to shift for a second, because then I kind of want to talk a little bit about the tokenism, because some people are like, well, you're here, so everything's fine. No, absolutely not. I'm here despite all the reasons why I could have quit. And every person of color I talk to have those stories, like, I probably should have quit, right? But they love history, and there's not really another place they can go that's as big tent as the SCA. You know, across the US, across the world, almost every, other weekend, once a month, there's an event in your area you can go to and do this cool thing. So at the risk of losing that intellectual stimulation, they were willing to put up with a modicum of bigotry. Like they're saying, I will put up with the bigotry. I will be uncomfortable because I want to do this. That's a big ask. Like, I don't think many white people realize how hard it is to go to an event, even if you are well liked, even if you are well known, even if you've been in the society and you have friends. There's always people that have made you uncomfortable, who've done things, and you have to see them at those events, and it's hurtful. So you're coming despite that. You're coming, you're fighting to stay here. And then if you go and talk to your people of color friends outside the SCA and you're like, this happened to me, and they're like, well, are you still doing that white people stuff? Like, that's why. Like, you can't even commiserate with them and get support from them, because they're like, leave those people alone. Why are you still hanging out with them? If they're treating you like this, leave them alone. And I think so the tokenism thing, the thinking that it's okay because I'm in the SCA or I'm in an office or I'm on the board, like, that's something people need to really let go. People of color are here despite the real racism they face at almost every event they go to, the microaggressions they face every time they come to an event, the issues they face getting to an event and driving through small town America, where you see flags and posters and license plates and all these indicators that you are not physically safe being in these areas in rural America. So please know that we need your support because of that, right? When you give us your regard, when you're supportive to us, it really helps take the brunt. It takes the edge off of all that other stuff we're going through. And I feel like I've been talking for a little bit, so I'm gonna let Jessica talk, but I have two more points I want to get to before, well, I'm just gonna say them.
Yeah, go for it.
Two things I suggest that we really promote, like among our white friends, is if you are not comfortable discussing racism, then you should not be in positions of power and influence in any group or organization or club. You're not going to be able to affect real change, because people of color like me will come, and then when they realize they're not safe, they will leave. The people of color in this organization that I know tend to be people who are used to being uncomfortable. They have been in white spaces their whole life. They can they can tolerate distressing feelings, and they're doing it at a cost, but they're making that choice. Many of my, people of color friends, POC friends, will not do that. They will not come on the weekend for fun, spend money, and be uncomfortable. They won't. So you will never be able to grow a real presence of people of color if you don't change. You'll just have the tokens. You'll just have the people you want to point to and say we're fine because they're here, but you're really not fine. Like, I can think of one female knight. Her name is Helga. Is Helga's presence as a knight, does that mean that we don't have a sexism problem in the SCA? Like, would anyone say that? Would anyone say that female fighters don't face issues? in the SCA? No, even though I can name one, and there are others I know, I just don't know their names offhand. So just because you can name one person of color in your kingdom or whatever, it doesn't mean there's not a problem. And then 2, remember that we as people of color are not going to bring our friends. I am not going to bring other Black people to events, because how can I in good faith work on bringing in new members if there's not a real system in place to protect them? I would feel like I brought them, to face harm, and I won't do that. So just know that even though we're here, there are some limits to what we're willing to do, and I don't want to bring someone else to be mistreated to a place, right? So when I think about the Jane Austen universe, there are some big things going on right now. Their events are at plantations, like there's just problematic things all over the place. I'm not going to go to those events, and I'm not going to bring any other Black people with me to any of their meetings until they really make a big change, because I don't want to be responsible for any harm that comes to their emotional well-being. So that was all I had to say about that.
Just, yes, all of it. Honestly, all of it. I mean, I can't imagine inviting my friends of color into this knowing that they're going to face the exact same microaggression so often rationalized away. Because I know it's okay, but I look at the good and I go, well, this stuff is really good, and maybe it's enough. And when I talk to some of my friends who have left the SCA, inevitably, I just feel like the racism is everywhere, that it's inescapable. And as awful as it sounds, I'm like, but where is it better? So maybe I stay because I don't expect better elsewhere, and I feel like I can make a difference here. But I mean, this job, since we're just being, right? This job is the hardest thing I have ever. It sucks. It is so hard. It is so difficult. There is so much pushback from basically everyone. It is too much. It is too much change. It is not enough change. It is not the right kind of change. You are addressing too narrow a community. You are trying to go too broad. There is no good answer, because the level of work that needs to be done is so incredible. And it does take an entire community working towards change. And there is one, right? We found each other through this community, but on bad days, I don't know if it feels like enough. And that's just being honest about it.
I think for me, one of the biggest turning points in kind of my SBA time was Trimgate. Since I came in, right, I noticed that there were microaggressions everywhere. The subtle othering that other people don't catch, but that we are really, really attuned to. So when Trimgate happened, it felt like finally people were seeing what we've been talking about and what we've been experiencing. And I know for folks who had been, at least folks that I know who had been in for a long time, didn't quite realize what people of color were going through until that came to light and more open discussions were had. And I hate to feel like the work that has been done will be put back on a shelf when events start happening again. I think that's been my biggest fear in and out of the SBA, is that right now we have the opportunities to make widespread change and reach widespread audience. But what happens when that leaves? Then I'm just another, person of color, or maybe the only person of color in an event. Which is also why I wanted to do this particular show, was because there are more of us than we realize. And finding and making those connections and having affinity groups and spaces to have these discussions about our experiences is really, really important for healing, for educating folks, and it just isn't happening enough. You both are operating as single department, right? When in the broad scheme of things, when we're talking about DEI work, right, you are kind of operating in silos. You have support systems. You know, I'm one of your biggest admirers and will do what I can to help you out. But there's so few of us scattered around that we just haven't made a dent in some of the stuff that's happened. But I did want to shift to some of the changes that you all have noticed, especially, yes, post-election, and really, especially during COVID and what's happening to the SBA.
You want me to go? You want to go?
I'm thinking about the question. Sometimes I need a minute to process. So yeah, if you could go.
Sure. So, because of kind of where I'm situated, the vast majority of the changes I have seen have been very policy based. I've been involved in a lot of those. I think people forget that there is kind of foundational policy work and then there's social work, right? And creating social change is not something any individual really can do. Changing an entire social climate takes a lot of people all working together over a period of time. And so that's the effort that's being made with education. But the policy changes can help to support and uphold some of the social structures if people know about them. So something that has been kind of a constant challenge with making sure people understand the changes is that people know about them at all, right? A good example is the Corpora update to the to the introduction. The introduction update removed some language that was very Eurocentric as far as what our focus is, and it broadened some language that needed to be broadened, right? It also took the core values and the mission statement and put them into the introduction. That mission statement hasn't changed. That is the same mission statement that was changed in, I believe, 2017 or 2018, where it removed the focus on Western Europe from the mission statement. A lot of people didn't know that. A lot of people thought that this was the first time we were broadening, when in reality, this was something that had already been done. The bullying and harassment policy had an update in April of 2020, I believe. Again, if people don't know it's there, if they don't know to use it, if they don't know that they have to abide by it, it's much less effective, because without the social pieces in place to reinforce it, it doesn't mean as much. The sexual misconduct policy also came out around the same time, I want to say. Gigi, correct me if I'm wrong. And again, if people don't know it's there, it's not as helpful. There's been a lot of work done to try to make sure that people know that these policies are in place to protect them, to tell them what they should be doing as members of the SCA. There's a lot of education available. There's a lot of people put into place to help with these processes. I think we're up to like 14 or 15 kingdoms that have DEI officers or deputies to the seneschal. But all of this means very little if people do not utilize the resources. And so I probably spend as much time trying to make sure that people are aware as I am anything else. And at this point, I'm not sure what else to do. You know, we've talked about this in a lot of the classes we've done. It's very central on the website now. There's now a singular link where you can go for all of our conduct and behavior policies. So you can just click one place and it'll link to all of them. And there's still a lot of people who just don't know. And so they think that there's nothing in place. And they think that there are no consequences for poor behavior. So either they don't report, or they don't know that they even can report. I mean, it's very problematic. And so kind of the changes going hand in hand with the lack of knowledge about those changes has been really difficult, I think.
Yeah. I really I like that you broke it down, because from the top down you make policy, right? That's even just how government works: policy, laws. And then from the bottom up comes implementation. Like, where does the rubber meet the road? How does this policy affect an actual behavioral issue or situation that comes up? How do those two things meet? And then that's where the refinement comes in, because the policy may need to be more specific to help guide that implementation. It may need to be more broad. But in working for the federal government, that's what I learned about. I worked as a planner, and my main focus was environmental protection laws, right? How those laws actually work when we're building things on the ground, when we're affecting wetlands, when we're affecting endangered species, all those laws that protect those things, those waterways or those species. How do we really, meet the spirit and the letter of the law when we're on the ground? And I'm seeing that in the SCA. I'm seeing, crowns are looking at what has been changed, and they're making use of those policies. They're sending up information about things they would like to see handled based on the changes that have been made. So that's really good. And I think also there are people who now realize that their behavior matters. And so they're adjusting some of the things that they would do or say at an SCA event. And I think that's kind of what we wanted. You can think whatever thoughts you want, and you can believe whatever you want, but if you attend an event, anywhere, there are rules you have to follow. If you're at a stadium, there are rules about what kind of bag you can bring there. It doesn't need to be see-through. Can you bring in your own drinks and food or no? As far as being a human being in America, you have to deal with police laws. You have to deal with speed limit, and you have to deal with, crosswalks and all these things, all these guidelines, right? And so the same thing at an SCA event. If you're at our event, we have rules that, provide some standards for your behavior. And I think people are really getting that. I did want to say two things I think that have really improved are people understanding privilege and talking about it, and understanding that the ability to opt out of suffering and injustice is the core of privilege. So the ability just to pretend like everything's okay and you should leave your race or your differently abled, issues at the gate, that is the core of privilege. And I think people really are beginning to understand that it's not about, whether you're rich or poor. It's just about some things in life that come to you a little easier than it comes to other people, and thinking about how you can, bring some equity into that situation. I like that. I like that these discussions, these classes have affected discussions, and they have affected people's actual behavior and thought processes. And the other thing was, I think if an organization like the Jane Austen one I talked about doesn't want to invest in creating a safe space, one that would be welcoming to a diverse audience, then they shouldn't bring in a new audience. And I think the SCA has also kind of understood that, we're not going to get more female fighters if we don't talk about the issues they're facing and believe them when they say there are problems, and then work to educate to fix those problems. And the same thing goes for differently abled people. The same thing goes for the LGBTQ plus community. And the same thing goes for people of color. The first part of creating a safe space and helping that policy meet the road and for things to change is to discuss what has gone right and what has gone wrong, and what can we do differently, and how can I personally take part in that. And I've seen a lot of people do that. I've seen so many people come to a class or even an online class and then, come to me and talk about what they want to do differently in their own local group, and how they want, to be a little different. They can provide support to other people, which I think is at the heart of chivalry, courtesy and honor and respect for other people and supporting them. So I'm happy about those changes.
You mentioned chivalry, and that's one of the things that I hope we'll get to when we're talking about allies. But I think it's really important to utilize some of the structures that we have in place, and those structures that are designed, I mean, in essence, they're a built-in power differential. So I think of, working with Night and the Night Council and using their influence to promote change. Looking at peers to really be those examples. I was working with Atia, our Kingdom Seneschal, to look at the Ontier laws and really, integrating some of that equity inclusion. And a lot of the pieces that I would like to see change is peerages, leaders to step up and demonstrate the qualities that we really should strive for, because the structure is built to support people in positions of power. And if we don't have buy-in from those groups, buy-in from those allies, we're not going to have systemic change, because those folks can also be the biggest barrier. I think about every time I do a class, the people who are in my bystander intervention classes are not the ones who need to be there. The people who need to be there are the ones who are never going to attend any class that anybody puts on, right? And so the only way to reach some of those folks is A, make the society so uncomfortable that they will self-select out, or B, utilize peer influence. Peer pressure is a big thing, a big drive for change. And, we need to pull some of those people in and really get some active spaces of leadership involved in this. It's hard though, right? It is difficult.
I also want to underscore Nina's bystander intervention class. Amazing. Everyone should take it. You're totally right that the people who need it won't be there, but everyone should take it. It's amazing. I think one of the really significant challenges that we see in people addressing issues both kind of outwardly and just internally, people really need to redefine the way they conceive of racism, or other isms for that matter. Because right now, I will tell you that I teach many of my classes avoiding what I know will be words that will inspire really negative feelings. And I know that racism is one of them. And I wish it wasn't, because racism should not be the cue to become incredibly defensive that it is for so many people, right? A lot of people hear that and it's this slight against who they are as a person. And they're like, how dare you say this about me? I would never partake in such, and it's such a difficult thing for them to process, because they've spent so much time trying to distance themselves away from anything like that. No, I'm a good person. I'm not a racist. If we redefine how we conceive of racism into a series of actions that you can take, even unintentionally, a structure that you can be a participant in, even if you don't realize it. If we make sure that people understand you might not intend to be racist, you might not be aware that there are racial connotations, but that doesn't mean that you haven't accidentally perpetuated it. I'm hoping that this will mean people will be less likely to leap to their own defense and more likely to try to listen to the feedback and examine what behavior might be upholding the structure, right? Because it's not about what exists in your heart all of the time. It's about ceasing to partake in certain actions and language. It really is. It's about avoiding upholding a method that systemically has existed forever. And it's not about who we are, who we imagine ourselves to be. It's about what we do. It's about establishing the knowledge. It's about gaining cultural understanding. We need to be able to take the critique and the feedback and not make it an attack on who we are and on ourselves. And I think until people do that, they're going to find it really difficult to address some of the more subtle issues that a lot of this manifests in. It's very hard to look at racist microaggressions if you refuse to admit that your behavior is problematic. I think that's a really, really significant challenge that the DEI community faces, quite honestly, even within our own community.
Agreed. I think I was listening to, it wasn't a TED Talk, it was on TikTok, I think. And this professor was explaining how these actions kind of fall under upholding white supremacy, right? Upholding the belief and the lies of white supremacy. And he had a list. Actually, it was a female. She had a list. And she's like, you know, these microaggressions actually come from, the root of them is that you bought into a belief that upholds white supremacy. And when you meet a person of color and you realize, well, that's different, this person, and so you make the comment because you think it's like a compliment, or you're making a verbal declaration of like this confusion, this cognitive dissonance you have in your head. So for instance, at an SCA function was asked why Black people who join the SCA don't speak like other Black people, right? And then, you know, in my life, I've also been asked like, well, why do you speak so well? You speak so white, like, and people don't realize that it's because the belief that upholds white supremacy is that Black people are not as intelligent, right? They are uneducated, their intellect is deficient, right? And these were all lies that they needed to sell to justify treating humans like animals, right? Slavery needed to be based in dehumanizing me, because if I was a human, a good Christian would never enslave me. So this propaganda is like seeped into the soil of our country. People don't even realize that they bought into it. They don't realize they were fed that propaganda. It's insidious. And so when they meet me, a lot of them do talk about the speech, the whole white, you speak like a white person, you speak so well, you speak intelligently, you must have gone to college. Like, because they're in their head, they're like, well, Black people don't talk like you, right? And so when it comes out at me, I know that, and it's hurtful. You think that you're asking me a question because you wanted some clarification, but I'm realizing that you think that I shouldn't speak well, that I'm not intelligent, and that I should spend my time proving to you and being perfect so I can, you know, prove to you that I am worthy. And so I think Jessica's right that it's hard to realize that you do problematic things. It does not make you a horrible person. It makes you a person who has been raised and lives in a society that upholds white supremacy. Like, that's the bottom line. And so if I say to you, that's a really hurtful statement, I don't think I speak well. I think I speak like an American, like I just do. And I think what you said is a little bit racist. And then you like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm not racist. And I don't want to go through that. So I just don't say anything. But then I keep that hurt with me. And it's just, it's a thing, you guys. And you guys know. And so these other microaggressions that happen, you know, kind of fall under the same premise, the cognitive dissonance that someone has in their brain, like, oh, this is different. Let me remark on that. I didn't know Black people like country music. I didn't, you know, just these weird, you guys, y'all know.
Oh yeah. Like, show of hands for who's been called an Oreo, or who's gotten well, you're not black, or you're not really black. Your English is really good. That's always a fun one, because I'm like, so it's the only language I speak, so let's hope.
Or asking me, did my father, like, do I know my father? Like, your parents married? Did your father, you know, were you raised? I'm like, studies show that Black fathers are amazing, but that lie that Black families are defunct is just, it's insidious, and it was used to justify ripping Black families apart so that you didn't have to keep this unit together. They don't belong together. They don't support each other. So let's just send the mom here and the dad here and the child there. No, they don't feel pain like we do. It's just,
and that's everywhere.
It goes back to white supremacy. So when we talk about racism and white supremacy, it's not because I want to point the finger at a white friend of mine and be like, you are. It's just, I want to educate them. I want them to know where this comes from so they can do better. Just like, you know, anything else about history. I'll say, well, did you know in the 15th century? The same way I'll say, did you know this is supporting white supremacy? Like it's the same type of comment.
Nina, I think you're...
Oh, are you on mute?
Oh no, I think her mic is just being problematic.
Well, I do. So since we can't hear her, still can't hear you. I do want to talk about self-care because Jessica, you talked about how this job is really taxing. So while Nina gets her mic together, I want to ask, what do you do for self-care? Like, how do you push through with, you know, this emotional labor? I mean, all people of color understand emotional labor and how draining it can be. So how do you, you know, fill the cup so you have more to give?
So I'm just gonna be real honest. I'm awful with self-care. I am awful. I consistently burn myself down and then end up going to my friends and being like, I hate this and I don't want to do it. And they're like, then quit. And I'm like, nah. Like it's just a cycle. So there's a quote that I really like that I try to like remind myself of. And it's by Tracy Ellis Ross, who's an actress who's amazing. And it's be gentle with yourselves, even though the world is not gentle to us. And so I've really tried to internalize the idea that my performance and my validation and the work that I've done is always going to face some level of scrutiny or critique. And it will never be enough for everyone, right? You can be the sweetest peach in the whole world and you will find someone who doesn't like fruit. So I have really had to get myself to a place of being okay and feeling good about the work that I have done and then believing when people tell me it's making a difference, which is very hard, right? It sounds so silly, like to say, right? You get 10 positive comments and 1 negative one, and you zero in on the negative one, and you're like, I'm not good enough. But the reality of it is that you really need to focus on what you have done and understand that it is enough. I mean, it is very difficult, as both of you know, it is very difficult engaging in this kind of labor from the standpoint of a marginalized person in the community. There is no taking it off. At the end of an exhausting class where you lay yourself bare to try to get across a point, where you sanitize all of your experiences to make them palatable for an audience that will never have them. And then they leave and go, man, that was heavy. Anyway, Chipotle? And you're just sitting there like, like, it's hard. And I guess just trying to put in bounds so that I'm so inflicting the same societal pressures on myself of not being enough, not doing enough. It's something I need to work on. It's something I try to remind myself, and it's something I need to work on. If either of y'all have better self-care,
well, I can hear Nina, so
yeah, you're back.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So as far as self-care for me, I love like reading the works of strong human beings who know how to use words to touch your heart, right? So I read Brene Brown. I love this poet called Najwa Zebian, and a lot of times, you know, it's words from them that help me remember the truth about life and the fact that everything isn't horrible. And it helps me remember the good parts of all the historical recreation that I do, because there are such good people. I have such strong connections with people who are amazing in all of these spheres, whether it's the SCA or the Jane Austen universe or the Greater Bay Area Costuming Guild. And so one of those things is setting boundaries for me. I think that's important for my self-care. While I'm generous to others who are doing the best they can, I have to set boundaries based on what my integrity will allow. I do not accept disrespect. I do not accept someone treating me in a way that makes it clear they don't respect me as a human being. I do not accept inconsistent communication. So if interacting with someone involves those things, disrespect, inconsistent communication, dehumanizing me, then I put up a boundary. And it's not that I wish the person any ill. I just want them to, be over there and I'll be over here. Because for my own, well-being, for my self-care, I need to not interact with you. And also I had to remember that belonging is a big part of joy, right? We feel happiness when we feel like we belong. But when you're othered, that is an indication that you don't belong, and that's hurtful. So I had to first stop looking for confirmation that I didn't belong, because I could find it, right? And I have to remember to tell myself that no one belongs here more than me, and just own that. Because being belonging is being accepted for who you are. Fitting in is being accepted for being like everyone else. And I don't want to fit in. I want to belong. I want to be me, and I want to be accepted. So I tell myself, I do belong here. It doesn't matter what other people are like saying or doing. I belong here, and I sit in that. And then that helps me find the joy in the essay, or resurrect the joy whenever things get really heavy. Because there's a lot of happiness in, geeking out over history and sitting around a campfire with your friends after an event, after you've all like worked and done classes and whatever, and you're just, it's joy. But sometimes that joy gets lost in some of these like microaggressions, or dealing with people who are saying things that are hateful and not wanting to make changes, or discounting you or othering you. So boundaries, finding, being grateful, talking about what I'm grateful for in the SCA, making sure I find the joy, knowing that I belong. Those are the ways that I try to practice self-care.
I will fully admit I'm not the best with self-care. I think part of that comes from, I do DEI work for a large organization. So I am 24/7 immersed in being a person of color. I find joy in crafting. So right now I'm restoring like an old bird bath, or doing some things around the house. My office is now surrounded with plants. So I think kind of having that growth, that energy around me is helpful. I have a very supportive partner. Like I don't know what I would do without my partner being able to be there. Family, friends, and I found a really good community within the SCA, and that makes a huge difference. I happen to be, and I always say this about Terra Primaria, that they are an amazing group of diverse people who really are just genuinely caring. And I think that was helpful. And then finding people such as yourselves to have these small affinity groups. Living in Oregon, especially Salem, Oregon, like one of the whitest of whites places, it's not easy to find affinity groups. So I was really excited to meet the both of you and be able to have those real moments, those unscripted, off camera, being ourselves and just kind of letting it all go, not having a code switch. I think that's what keeps me going. And my animals. I have a lot of animals.
Also, Terra Primaria, if you look up the Barony of Terra Primaria, they are doing amazing stuff in education. They have been running classes for like a year plus. It's really remarkable. And the work that has gone into finding folks to teach and creating this huge catalog of classes, many of them DEI related. I think all of us have taught there at some point. But yeah, it is really incredible to me that people are putting forth that level of effort and consistency and work. And I will say, like, that is the kind of stuff that I can look at and be like, yeah, this is good. I'm all right. Everything's okay.
Yeah.
It's really meaningful knowing that you're not kind of alone, even if some days you're like, oh wow, all of this is awful, as it turns out.
I can agree with that. for every person that irritates me or who does something that I think is hurtful that I have to like work on letting go, right? There are 3 or 4 people who bring me joy in the SCA, right? And it's like you said earlier, it's hard to focus on the positive, right? It's like that one negative thing that just won't leave your mind, that you can't let go of, yeah. But when I'm able to remember, hey, I can just shift my focus just like a degree to the right or left, and I can name people in every kingdom in the SCA that are amazing, right? People from all walks of the SCA, whether they are peers or not, whether they fight or not, whether they are people of color or not. So thinking about those people, I'm also grateful for them. And some days I just have to think about them and leave the rest of the people for another day.
Yeah, I think self-care is one of those things that when you're dealing with high emotional labor, it's kind of very hard to turn it off, because there is this kind of obligation that I feel that I think Nina referred to earlier, of like, if I don't do this, who will? Which isn't fair to me. Like, it's not fair of me to put it on myself. And certainly it's not coming out of a place of hubris. It's coming out of a place of, I don't want other people to have to feel like this. Like, I don't want other people to have to go through the things that I have gone through. I mean, the emails I have gotten, there's been modern illegal activity that I've dealt with. There's been threats, there's been all kinds of issues, and I'm like, I don't want any other person of color to deal with this. So I'll do this work until I can't, which is not healthy. It's not, and it's not realistic. I'm not sure how to better that situation besides expanding the community, right? Broadening the community until there are enough people of all backgrounds, from all perspectives, who can step in and say, hey, I can do this. You can take a break. I can do this. And certainly those people are here and working, but likely feel similarly, honestly. So it's hard. That's a really difficult thing.
I am lucky that I have the opportunity to teach the train the trainer bystander intervention, because I've been doing it for so long that I'm needing to step back because I can't do it all. And have 30 people already signed up for the train the trainers at the end of August. So I think, as people are seeing this, hopefully as they're watching the show and they're hearing these different stories, that we can bring folks into the fold and have really solid allies. And I know we're going to talk about allies, because you can be a well-intentioned ally and not do so well for the people you are trying to support. But I think if we can really continue to bring people into the fold, and that's the way I approach EDI work to begin with, bringing people alongside, that eventually people are going to want to engage. But it's hard, right? It requires doing a train the trainer session, and it requires all of these things. And there's only so many hours in a day, and so many times that you can teach and recover from teaching and doing all of that work.
When we get to the conversation about allies, which I don't know, are we ready to go there?
I think we should. Let's do it.
Gigi, if you would like, you can go first, because I'm about to lose friends. So
Okay, I'll go first. I appreciate, I try to be an ally to other people, right? I try to speak up to help other people where I see a need, right? If there's something they need, whether it's someone is starting to study the Italian Peninsula, right? And they don't know where to start. I'm like, well, let me help you. I don't, these are some resources here, you know. Also, if I see someone on the side of the road who can't change a tire, I would stop and be like, hey, let me help you. So I can call myself an ally to other people in general because I try to help them. But the word ally is confusing for me because you can just declare that you're one, right? I just did. I said, I'm an ally to other people because of these things I do. And I told you the reasons why. And no one can tell me that I'm not, right? Because I just told you the reasons why. So let me just be clear about people of color. If your support for people of color, especially Black women, is predicated on you being comfortable, then you are not our ally. And you shouldn't be saying you are. And it's okay if you're not. Just, you know, don't false advertise to us, because then we'll look to you for help and then you'll be like, I don't have any help for you. And then I'll be disappointed. So if it's that you don't want your feelings hurt, that you don't want to feel uncomfortable, you don't want to answer any hard questions, you don't want to be scrutinized at all, that you can't stand discomfort, and then you're probably not going to be a good ally. And that's fine. I would just appreciate people not screaming that they're allies, and then when I look around for help, crickets. It's very disconcerting. And I've been in situations where people have pretended to be allies, and then, you know, someone asked me, well, why do you make everything about DEI? And I looked to my allies and they're like, and then I'm like, well, okay, I'm alone. All right. Or they ask me something like a microaggression, like, you know, they say something insulting and no one else says anything. Or they ask me things like, how can we celebrate Juneteenth? When I'm like, you haven't been my ally this whole time and now you want to know how to celebrate Juneteenth? How about support the actual Black people in your life, like when they need it? So allies, the subject of allies is really, it's complicated. I would love to accept help from allies. I really have an issue with the word and the concept because it's thrown around a lot lately, and you don't have to be an ally. You can just be you doing your thing and not, you know, say that, because when you indicate that to me, then my feelings get hurt when I feel, you know, alone.
Yep. All of that. So a lot of white folks are absolutely fundamentally convinced of two things. One is that they know racism when they see it, and two is that they would definitely do something about it if they saw it. And here's the hard truth. Most of you don't, and most of you won't. There's this image of racism as this faceless white hood tap dancing out with a swastika flag in one hand and a burning cross in the background, chanting raceless slurs and, I don't even know, cursing out the cast of Blackish. And like, yeah, we would all stand up to that shit immediately, right? Like we would all jump in front of our friends who are people of color and tell this person how unwelcome they are. And then the justice force of anti-racism would appear and carry them off, never to be seen again. And yay, we solved racism all in a day's work. It's amazing. But that hero complex is nonsense, because the reality is racism is insidious and it is ever present. And I almost guarantee that everyone has seen many, many, many racist situations in their life and have done literally nothing about them. Possibly had not even realized that they were racist at the time to begin with. We all like to think that, yeah, we'll swoop in and we'll save the day when something so obviously horrific happens. But modern marginalization is very subtle, and it often comes from people that we otherwise love and respect. It is a hell of a lot easier to mentally stand up to faceless hood number one than it is to stand up to your best friend Joe or your Aunt Martha over the dinner table when you know it's going to cause a huge fight later. It is frustrating to me to see people who automatically assume not only that they would do the right thing, but that they would always be there to witness it. Because quite frequently, a lot of the issues I see are snide comments under the breath, They're little things that other people in the conversation don't catch. And then when I talk about them later, I get, oh, they wouldn't do that, or they didn't mean it like that, or I'm sure that wasn't it. The SCA has a really big problem with this. White people in general have a really big problem with this. So here is my honest to God advice. Get yourself a script. It can be really light. It can be really detailed. It can be whatever you need to feel comfortable getting yourself into the habit of saying, that is not okay. That was a shitty thing to say. Whatever it needs to be, practice having those conversations. Practice de-escalating situations so that the people of color who you are defending are not then put in a more difficult place. Practice asking your friends who are people of color what they need in the moment and not making it about yourself. Another really significant issue is people who identify as allies taking on the anger of these marginalized groups to the point where they won't participate. It's not your anger. You are making space for them. You do not get to be the person that gets really angry and stomps off and refuses to help. Because do you know who is left standing there when you do that? We are.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your anger. Help, be the shield, be the educator, or don't call yourself an ally. So yeah.
I think, yeah, no, thank you. Thank you both. I mean, this is our opportunity to really speak our truth. And hopefully in doing so, educate some folks. To me, an ally is never, people who call themselves allies, like you said, are typically not. Because to me, an ally is someone where the actions are there. So I think about the difference between being non-racist and being anti-racist. You can be non-racist all day long. That doesn't help me. It doesn't help other people of color. It doesn't help make change. Being anti-racist can be the strongest ally, way to show that you are an ally. And that means taking an active stance, like you said, calling it out. We have the opportunity to build a culture where we can feel comfortable bringing someone in and saying, hey, this is not okay. Here's either an alternate kind of thing to say or do. But really, what I want to see happen from allies is if I say, this thing was offensive and here's why, that someone says, thank you. Because one, I'm taking the time I believe that they are worth it. I believe that they can change. I believe that they can be trustworthy. And so I'm giving them the opportunity to change. So I want people to start getting used to saying thank you to feedback instead of becoming completely defensive. Because most of the time, if I don't care about someone, I'm not going to say anything. I'm like, I'm just going to pass this off because that person doesn't need the time of day. I think the other piece that I really want folks to hear is that when you call yourself an ally, you have to be like y'all were talking about, you have to be in it 110%. This is not I'm going to be an ally today because I'm seeing you. This is not performative work, right? That's the other thing that I'm worried about when we go back, is that all of this work ends up being completely performative, and people go back to doing the same thing. Someone who is an ally won't. Someone who is an ally won't tolerate us sliding back into the SCA and all the other things that we've done. Someone that is an ally will show me that they are safe. And I don't know if white people understand when we experience, and this is, for almost everyone I've talked to across the board as a person of color, we have this dance when we hear this, either a microaggression or some sort of slight that we caught, because we can be much more perceptive to those things, that we go through did they really mean it that way? Should I say something? If I say something, am I going to be the angry person of color? Is it worth doing all of these things, it's going to be an extra burden on me. And most of the time, I can at least speak for myself, we don't say anything because nobody else is reacting, nobody else is noticing. And if I feel like if I bring it up, then I'm going to be seen as the problem person making more out of it. So allies need to be able to pick up on those really small microaggressions, and I mean, really up to the big behaviors, and be willing to talk about them, address them, educate, and really let the person know that it's not going to be tolerated. And if they can continue to do it, they just don't need to be here. And that's what I would like to see from allies.
Absolutely. Like it is not enough anymore to just slap the word on yourself and call it a day. And it can be very difficult when you see people who they're like, but I'm trying. Because quite frankly, I am at the point where I almost just want to say straight out, like, hey, your Wakanda on the weekends bullshit does me no good. It doesn't help me. Like, I need you to be there when there are actual issues. I need you to believe me when I tell you that behavior is problematic, even when it comes from someone you love, even when you're the one doing it, even when you feel like addressing it would cause yourself some kind of social repercussion or harm, because it has already caused us harm.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not willing to put yourself in between that, if you're not willing to stand up and use your platform to elevate the voices of people of color, and I do mean elevate, I do not mean speak over. The last thing that anyone should be doing who is trying to help is to take on a fight that people don't want you to take on, or to talk over people or take their words. I mean, I can't tell you how many times people have quoted me, but not because they're not quoting me. They're repeating what I'm saying as their own words. That's not helpful. Like, that's not helpful to me. What is helpful is elevating the voices of people of color, not stealing the words of people of color, who often have had enough stolen from them in the past that this is just a furthering of existing trauma.
So we talked a little bit about, well, we've talked at length about advice for allies. I wanted to maybe touch on, I know we're at an hour and a half, but maybe touch on the challenges and barriers that the SCA needs to overcome, either as a society or as specific groups, specific kingdoms, because I know that there are different cultures, especially when we're talking about some of the places that are more, I mean, monochromatic. They're much more higher percentage of white people. I know. Monochromatic. I'm sorry. That's something we've used in my modern job. But I think there are a lot more challenges that people may not see. For instance, I talked about Trimgate, right? There are still conversations about weaving that pattern. Why are we even still talking about this, right? So what are some of the challenges that y'all see that we need to address as events are starting up again?
Yeah, so I just want to say this. It's adjacent to what you're asking. I've been in situations where we have established policy against certain things like the swastika, and people have still made excuses for it, like in conversation in front of me in camps. And it's very, very, very uncomfortable for me, because first I thought it was already established that we have a policy on hate speech and symbols, right? And because of that, I thought, then of course, especially for leaders and peers and people in positions of power, officers, representatives, there would be no question that you're going to uphold our policy, because that's what you do when you support an organization. You support their policies. So if you are a leader in the organization, you follow the party line. And our policy says swastikas are a no-go. And I have sat in a camp and had someone tell me, but they're not that big of a deal. What's wrong with, I don't understand. And it's like, so number one, it's not my job to explain that to you. Number two, we have a policy. So it doesn't really matter what I say or whether my explanation is persuasive enough to make you believe it. We have a policy against this. End of story. And you mentioned trim gate, so that's kind of what I wanted to share. Like, being a person of color, being an ally to people who have been killed because of that symbol, I'm not going to put up with it. Like, I'm just not. And it blew my mind that that person said that to me, and they were who they were. And then to top that off, there was someone else in the camp who had bought some Mongolian or some ethnic type of boot that uses the flywheel or the sun wheel, and there was a swastika on the boots. And they were like, well, he bought those things, and of course he's not going to take a marker and mark it off. There was just a little bit of a symbol on the boots. You couldn't really see it, right? It was camouflaged by other symbols. But I was just floored that not only did this person say this, make the statement that he didn't think the swastika was a problem, it's not that big of a deal, and then he's like, plus they're on his boots. And I'm like, we're at an SCA event, people. Think about the message you're sending when you do things like that. I still play in the SCA, but if I had been a new person, that might have been my last event ever. And I would go on to tell anyone who would listen, do not join those people. They have serious problems. Yes, their policy says this, but what they do is actually, people are watching us. People are not idiots. They can see patterns. They can read between the lines. That's all I wanted to say about that.
Oh gosh. We've kind of touched on this already. But it feels like the Black experience that is consumable for people is incredibly narrow. And I'm very tired of feeling like I have to fit into it. And I think that creates a lot of tension at SCA events, right? The constant code switching, the constant commentary on what I should be doing or what I'm doing that wasn't what they imagined that I should be doing, or that I'm XYZ for a Black girl, or any of that. That's really problematic. And I think the constant kind of reminders of othering and the constant just narrow band that I often feel obligated to exist within is something that people don't really realize they're enforcing. But I'm like, why would any new person come in and want to deal with this? Like, as frustrated as people get when they tell me that DEI it's too much, there's no reason we need all of this. This is my vacation and I came here to leave it at the door and I don't want to deal with modern politics. And I'm like, yeah, so did they. So did I.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not a thing. I don't get any less Black when I walk into an SCA event. I mean, it is what it is. And so with the knowledge that this is impossible to leave at the door, leave at the gate, people need to be actively pushing against the kind of thinking and bias that puts them in the position of shoving other people into these expected roles. Also, as far as kind of like, and this is maybe a little bit too specific, but I really wanted to touch on it, so I'm going to do it here. There is a certain amount of trauma that is totally acceptable to talk about and revisit and present when it occurs to Black or brown bodies. And people of color, we know Here's your blanket message. Here's the one time I will speak for other people. We know that there are terrible things happening to people that look like us, and we don't need you to constantly remind us and tell us about it and send us videos and send us screen caps and articles, and you're not getting any ally points for it. I don't need you to come and prove to me that you are somehow a good and informed person by telling me about the latest atrocity in the modern world while I'm at an SCA event and just trying to like unfuck my tablet weaving. So please don't. Please understand that you are revisiting trauma on your friends of color and not coming across as like a super informed, super aware person when you come dashing up to tell us about yet another terrible thing that has happened in our community, usually perpetuated by outside folks. So I'm dropping that in there because it has happened to me enough that like when people come up to me and they're like, hey, I just wanted to know if you had heard about it. I'm like, what is this about? Because I have gotten surprise videos sent to me of people being shot. Literally, people just sent me the video and I did not know that I was about to watch a Black person get murdered until I clicked play. That's not okay. So don't do that to your friends who are people of color. Feels basic, but it clearly needs to be said.
Agreed. It's just, you're right, it's traumatic. It's we already know that there are people who have bought into the dehumanizing propaganda. We already know that our lives are not they're not worth as much. To some people, they just don't care about our lives. I know personally that if I leave this campground that I'm at and get into an altercation with a cop and I don't make it, that maybe no one will care. And maybe every bad thing that I've ever done in my life will be paraded before, you know, God and everybody to justify why I'm not alive anymore. And that sucks. So no, I don't want to see George Floyd dying again. I never want to see that video again. I've already seen it, but I already have the stories of people who I grew up with who didn't make it, who are no longer alive, and the people that my parents grew up with. Like, we had those stories are taught to us as warnings to be careful with how you present yourself to the world. Like, we are told these things from a very early age. Be careful. Watch how you comport yourself. Be careful, because bad things can happen to you. So it is traumatizing, Jessica. I think that's exactly the word, to have people sending you video and pictures of Black people being killed. I also wouldn't want to see videos of women being raped. Like, I wouldn't, and I don't think I would ever send one to anyone. That's exactly what I would compare watching a Black person be murdered to. I don't want to see violence visited against anyone, but especially someone who looks like me, because that fear is very real. It's a very real possibility that I could be in an altercation where I don't make it, and then it really not matter. So trauma, that's an appropriate word.
I think that, some people don't understand that when it happens to a member of your community, it's vicarious trauma. You always think about, what if that was you? I have 2 younger brothers, and when I couldn't watch all of George Floyd video. I just couldn't. I got really sick and had to turn it off. But I thought about my brothers. Like, what happens if they get pulled over? Especially since one of them is a complete smartass, right? We all get the talks when we're growing up. If you get pulled over, here's what you do. Here's where you go. Here's where safe. Here's where, you shouldn't be. And we have those behaviors that show it. So, there are some small towns that I drive through and I have my music down, my windows up. I'm driving the speed limit because I know that if I were to be pulled over for any reason, that it would be a very negative experience being in, kind of a white redneck town. I don't want to say redneck, a white historically racist town, especially the sundown towns. And so we live that every day. And then I'm going to use the term, Jessica, that you used, because that's how I've referred to it as myself. It's trauma porn. Like, people don't realize that every time you send that, it is like gut wrenching, opens up so many wounds. We are very much aware of what is happening because it's been in our existence. We've dealt with it our entire lives. It just so happens that now people have instant access to these videos and really want to talk to them. Well, we're still processing them. Like, we know they're out there. We know this happens on a daily basis. You happen to see this one video. I think about the verdict from George Floyd's case. Yay, he got, 22 and a half years or whatever. And are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? So one person, one cop out of I don't know how many are, is being held somewhat accountable. We know all this. We feel the effects of all of this. So yeah, I don't want to talk about it. We live it. I'm at work. My job is taking kind of civil rights complaints. I hear the worst of humanity at work. We see the worst of humanity in our personal lives. Like, now is the time to help build some safe spaces by providing the support that we need. And I think that's a very important distinction. So when you provide support to people, you find out what they need, not what you think they need. Because oftentimes I found someone believes they're doing good and has well intentions, but it's not what I need at the time. And it really can damage relationships by that. So there was my little spiel. We know it's out there. We are very much aware of it. We don't need to talk about it, don't need to hear it, because we wear it, every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it's important. I'm just going to underscore what you said about finding out what people need, right? There will absolutely be times where people need the ear, they need the support, they need you to be there and to listen. But much like dealing with other types of grief, you kind of leave it to the person, right? And you're respectful of where they're at in their process. And you don't impose your pain secondhand on them in the process, right? Like, yeah, it's hard. Okay, it's harder to be in front of it. So making sure that we are being consistent and quite frankly, being aware of where our friends are, where their headspace is, checking in with them. I think that is a really important way to kind of navigate getting back to events and getting back to everyday life, outside of mostly being virtual. See what people need and then do that, which again, on the long list of things I should not have to explain. When someone tells you that what they need is not for you to do XYZ, if you then go ahead and do XYZ because you think you know better, at best, condescending, and at worst, engaging in the same tacit structures of racism that have infantilized and dismissed us for centuries, right? So listen and then act.
Mm-hmm. So before we wrap up, we did have one question submission prior to the panel. So I wanted to read that and then give you all an opportunity to respond, and then we'll kind of close out the show. So the question was, what will you do to ensure complete inclusivity of all voices of color, including anyone who may follow different philosophies because of various professional and personal experiences? How can we expect white people to understand our struggle if we have conflict within our own voices? And why are outspoken voices of color immediately silenced when internalized oppression is called out? So I know there's a lot of parts to that. Maybe you just kind of pick one or several aspects, but.
So for me, I actually welcome differing thoughts because I know by my lived experience that no group is a monolith. So among my friends who are people of color, who identify as Black women even, they all have different lived experiences. They may have different opinions on different things. But having conversations about that and hearing how their opinions differ broadens my understanding of, Black women in general. So I welcome hearing differing opinions because maybe some reasoning behind your different opinion will inform me and I'll be able to make better decisions or change my opinion if necessary. And I'm the same way in the SCA with like historical information, right? I might think something is right, but if someone says, actually, this reference that I found shows that this thing you thought was, singular isn't. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. So I am open to being wrong across like all these sectors. And I think, for other people of color, who identify as part of other groups that are not Black. They have different lived experiences, but I definitely want to hear about theirs. I want to understand them better so I know how to be their ally because they've been through things and they were raised in ways that I don't have, access to that information. So as far as like First Nations or say someone grew up in a Latinx household, like I have Spanish heritage, but I did not grow up in that culture. So I will listen to what they have to say so I can learn from them and learn how to be there for them. And I'm just a curious person by nature. So, but for me, so all those voices are welcome. I don't think I've ever seen any of those voices shut down. And if I did, I would say, hey, we shouldn't be shutting people down. We should be listening to them because that's what I would want done for me. So, but what isn't welcome for me is if personally is slander or attacks or insults or other actions that mimic what I go through with bigots and oppressors. Like if that's coming from another person of color, then I will put up the same boundary I put up with non-POC. And I'll say, you are not a safe person for me. And so, I wish you well speaking out on your platforms elsewhere, but not to me or with me or on my platforms because I don't accept abuse and disrespect from anyone. So
I think so there were a lot of parts in that. I think the concept of internalized depression and the idea that we can't expect white folks to understand our struggle if we have conflict in our own voices is actually just upholding problematic structures. There will be conflict. We're not a monolith. There will be people that don't agree. I have seen many folks who are like, oh, I just don't see any problems. I didn't see any. And I can't account for that because just like they don't agree, my experiences don't invalidate theirs. And I don't like the idea that my experiences would be dismissed either. I am more than just a Black person. I'm an Afro-Latina. I am queer. I'm a woman. I mean, I have a lot of complex background that makes up the person that I am. And all of that feeds into who I've become and how I move through the world. I think the idea that people of color need to present some sort of completely unified front in order to move forward as a group is tremendously problematic. I think it's an impossible task and an obstacle to progress. And I think the concept of internalized depression, it's certainly a valid one, right? We all exist in the same society. Certainly there are messages that I have noticed I have had to decolonize from my thinking. Absolutely. But that shouldn't be invalidating. All of that is still a larger part of the system we live in. All of that is still a larger part of the consequences of living in systemic racism. I don't see people being silenced. I see a lot of people in the community with differing points of view trying hard to respect one another, and I wouldn't advocate for people being shut down simply because their experience didn't match mine.
Thank you. Yeah, I know that was a heavy question. So one, I really want to thank you both for being on this first show. For those who don't know, this isn't something that's been done before. And so we are walking in, trying to be our authentic selves while at the same time bringing folks into this affinity kind of space. Because I think there are a lot of things that people can learn from just listening, especially when we talk about, personal stories and experiences in the SCA, understanding and believing that these things happen, and understanding and believing that our experiences, again, don't end at the gate. I again want to thank Ashaksi for helping me get all this ready. I was terrified and out of my realm, and between Ashaksi and the two of you, I think that, this can be a very successful place to help educate folks and help people really see the people behind the stories. I think it's really important that we are able to connect and provide validation for our individual experiences, because we know that we're not the only ones. I did want to, someone had asked about if there was somewhere that people could donate to kind of pay it forward. My recommendation is Hollaback. So Hollaback is a nonprofit entity that does bystander intervention training. They have a new space that they've launched for online bullying and harassment. So they have amazing resources. They also have some more trainings that you can take on bystander interventions. And the last thing I want to end with, and just it's more of an acknowledgement that July is National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. And oftentimes people who are in racial and ethnic minority communities don't have enough places to go to seek mental health. And there's a lot of stigma around seeking mental health. And look after your friends. If they are truly someone that you are working on being an ally towards, or someone that you care about, help them find the support that they need. It is really difficult to find services that meet your cultural need and your cultural identity. And building affinity groups or connecting people with community resources can be a very strong sense of support. We deal with historical oppression. We deal with racism on the daily, right? And not to even mention our intersecting identities. And that takes a toll on the mental health, and that can take a toll on entire communities. So really kind of bringing this to light, because I really want us as a community to start really supporting each other and understanding that the issues are large, and we do what we can every little bit, every little day. I did want to announce the next show. We have Draven Mcrae on July 20th. I'm really excited. I had an opportunity to speak with him yesterday, and he has some absolutely amazing stories that provide so much insight into the working of the SCA, his experience as being a person of color and a mentor and a leader. So please join us again. I will be sure to post something in advance. And then lastly, if you would like to be on the show or suggest that someone is on the show, you can contact me through the Voices of Color Skadian Stories website. We have a list. I can add folks to the list. It is an ever-growing list, so I'm really excited for what the future holds, but feel free to contact. Thank you all for watching, and hopefully we'll see you soon.